Suspense, tension, same thing, right? Not even close. But before I tell you the difference between the two, I'm going to put you in suspense. What's up, guys? My name's Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer, and welcome to my writing channel. Today I'm going to be talking about suspense and tension, and these are two things that people often mistake for one another, and I just want to say up front, they are not the same thing. Get that out of your head. Now, the easiest way to understand the difference between the two is to realize that suspense involves waiting. When we talk about suspense, usually there's a question raised in your story and the answer is withheld. We don't get an immediate answer to that question. We are kept in suspense until it is answered. Now, on the other hand, tension is an immediate feeling of discomfort brought on by an action or an event. In other words, this happens immediately. Something just happens that creates tension, as opposed to suspense being dragged out as we're waiting for an answer to a question. Now, when we talk about suspense, typically it's going to be a more big picture idea. And this is especially true when you think of your main story question. This is usually the question that your plot is built upon. Will the Rebel Alliance defeat the Empire? Will Walter White raise enough money for his family before he dies of cancer? Will Katniss win the Hunger Games? Will Indiana Jones beat the Nazis to the artifact? Those are big picture questions. They're usually asked early on in the story and they are not resolved until the very end of the story. They create suspense, they keep us wondering, and they keep us invested. We have something to play for until the very end. Now, you can't rely on just that one single story question to keep your audience invested throughout the whole story. If you just have one question and then it's answered at the end, your audience is going to be waiting a long time for some kind of payoff. That's why you include smaller sources of suspense throughout your story. You might ask a question in Act 1 and resolve it at the end of Act 1, or you might ask a question at the beginning of a scene in the middle of Act 2 and then resolve it 2 scenes later, or something like that. You want to give some answers as well as questions throughout the story. Now, when it comes to injecting tension into your stories, there are a lot of ways of doing it, and I'd recommend trying to put some tension into every single scene you write, whether it be like major high-stakes tension or some low-key tension. There are so many different ways to include tension in a scene. Just some basic examples include things like just basic conflict or an argument or a fight, or you can have like a dirty look, or you can have even silence. I mean, think about how many times do we see in stories where two characters are having an exchange and then one character makes a remark and the other just doesn't respond. They leave it with silence. That can have a lot of tension if you do it properly. And there are so many different ways of creating this tension. Your job as the writer is to find creative new ways to do it. Now, there are a ton of great stories out there that use suspense and tension to keep the audience engrossed. Today I want to talk about Indiana Jones, specifically the third movie, The Last Crusade. And if you remember, this is the one where Indiana Jones and his father are trying to find the Holy Grail before the Nazis do. And that is the key story question. Will Indiana Jones get to the Holy Grail before the Nazis do? And it's not resolved until the very end of the story, so we need other smaller sources of suspense. We need other questions raised and answered along the way. One of the earliest questions that's raised is, will Indiana Jones find his missing father? And that's resolved at the end of the first act. Then you have the question, will Indiana Jones and his father escape the castle? Later on, you have the question, will his father be caught before the blimp takes off? And so on and so on. There's so many great sources of suspense in this movie. It's why it's one of my favorites. And as far as tension goes, there are tons of tense moments throughout the story. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I want to point out a couple. I think one of the most memorable ones is that tense moment where Indy realizes that he and his father have slept with the same Nazi woman. That's an awkward moment. That evokes a sense of discomfort in the audience. Then also later on in the story, there's also that moment where Indy bumps into Adolf Hitler after he obtains his father's diary from the book burning ceremony. And I think that's another great moment where you have that immediate tension. It's not something that we were waiting for. It's not something that we were expecting. It just happens and it's uncomfortable and the audience loves it as a result. So I hope all this information helps. Question of the day, what is the main story question in your current work in progress? And also, what is one other question that is answered early on in the story? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend if you don't mind. And as always, remember to keep on writing.